Welcome members, guests, and speakers. Thank you all for attending in person and online. My name is Linda Smith, and I'm honored to serve as the program director for the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake. You may know our Utah League and Salt Lake League have both voted to advocate regarding the affordable, accessible childcare this year. Accordingly, we are very pleased to have an expert panel present on the childcare crisis, the problem and possible solutions tonight. As is our tradition, the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake would like to begin tonight's meeting by acknowledging that we are gathering on Indigenous land. The Salt Lake Valley has always been a gathering place for Indigenous people, and we acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute people, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute nations, and is a crossroads for Indigenous peoples. We pay respect to the elders past and present. We also consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that are our history and legacy, and seek to uncover the truth. For 100 years, the League of Women Voters has been a nonpartisan, activist, grassroots organization that believes voters should play a critical role in democracy. We encourage informed and active participation in government, work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influence public policy through education and advocacy. Simply put, our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. We would like to acknowledge 17 new individuals who have joined the League during September. If you are present here tonight, please stand, or if you're online, put a note in the chat. Our new members are Katie O'Bannon, excuse me if I mispronounce anybody's name, Katie O'Bannon, Karen Butler, Darwin Jepson, Diana Johnson, Catherine Stevenson, Susan Sharp, Mindy Smolka, Robert Cummings, Nancy McCormick, Leonore Peretta, Micah Robbins, Melanie Topham, Martha McGowan, Hillary Sharton, Heidi Brett, Janine Donald, and Jeanette Dushimamana. A disclaimer. A recording of tonight's event will be made available to the public on the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake website and on our social media. Other recordings of this event, whether they be in person or on computer screen, may not be used without the express approval of the League. The League will only allow audio video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by media reporting on the event. There will be some important League announcements at the end of the presentation. And now I turn to introduce our panelists. Professor Susan R. Madsen is the Karen Hite Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. She is also the founding director of the Utah Women and Leadership Project, and is leading a statewide social change movement titled A Bolder Way Forward. Professor Madsen and her team have written many Utah research and policy briefs and white papers, research snapshots, partnered reports, newspaper editorials, and other resources. They host many events each year to support the mission of their work. Dr. Madsen is also a well-known global scholar, authoring or editing 9 books and publishing hundreds of articles, chapters, and reports. Her research has been featured in U.S. News and World Report, The Atlantic, The New York Times, Parenting Magazine, Chronicle of Higher Education, The Washington Post, and she is a regular contributor to Forbes. She is a well-known speaker in local, national, and international settings, and serves on or advises many nonprofit, community, and education boards and committees. Dr. Madsen received her bachelor's degree from BYU, a master's from Portland State, and a doctorate from the University of Minnesota. She and her husband, Greg, are the proud parents of 4 adult children and 6 grandchildren, maybe in counting. I'm not sure if we've got the numbers right. Our next speaker will be Janell Cerva, PhD. She is the Chief Impact and Strategy Officer of the Utah Community Action. In this position, Dr. Cerva leads strategic partnerships and initiatives for one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the state, supporting children and families experiencing poverty. Her current priorities include affordable housing development for seniors and families, expanding access to high-quality early childhood opportunities. In addition, she leads UCA's Data and Policy Department, the Development and Communication Department, and supports the agency's governing body comprised of parents and community members. Previously, she facilitated community-based early childhood partnerships for United Way of Salt Lake, and homeless and housing initiatives for Salt Lake County. She received a BA in English and Political Science from Brigham Young University and a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Utah. She recently completed her PhD in Educational Leadership and Policy at the University of Utah, where her research focused on cross-sector collaboration for social impact. Next, Reverend Bridgette Weier with Care for Kids Network. Reverend Weier holds a Bachelor of Science in Education from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and was certified to teach K through 8 in Nebraska in 1993. Her experiences in childcare span over 30 years, beginning in 1990 when she was a childcare provider, and include work in large and small childcare centers, after-school programs, running her own family care program in Nebraska, and founding and directing St. Matthew Lutheran Preschool in Oregon. In 2012, she earned her Master's in Divinity from Luther Seminary, St. Paul, Minnesota. She is an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and has served congregations ranging in size from 150 to 4,000 members. Today, she is pastor at St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Taylorsville, Utah, and serves as organizer with the Utah Care for Kids Network, a program of the Utah Association of Young Children. And finally, Holly Phillips, Director of Operations at Utah Afterschool Network. Ms. Phillips earned a bachelor's degree in wildlife ecology, information, and education from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and worked as a forest ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park and as education director for the Canyon Country Discovery Center in San Juan County. She is currently the Director of Operations for Utah Afterschool Network, a statewide nonprofit dedicated to high-quality after-school programs. So I hope you are all impressed with the degree of expertise we have before us and ready to learn a lot. Dr. Madsen, we'll begin with you.
It's good to be here tonight and good to see all of you and welcome those that are online as well. We each have been asked to talk for 10 minutes. So since I was going first, I wanted to just give some overview. I am a women's leadership scholar. I have a lot of depth in that. I'm also a societal change scholar and have a lot of depth in that. But then I do research in almost everything girls and women in the state, and I don't necessarily have a lot of depth in each of them. So these three are the true experts. I know enough to be dangerous. And we publish lots of reports. I actually brought copies, and I'll pass them out later, or we can move them around, of our latest 2023 Childcare What Utahns Need to Know. So it's a 4 or 5 page that we brought together everything we could find from all sources. And so wanted to just set the stage a bit in terms of how we have approached this topic in the state of Utah. There's been people, my colleagues have worked for years and years in this space, but it hasn't been a topic that's been talked about really in terms of decision-making, like let's do something different in the state, until I would say even, a little bit earlier, but I would say about 3 years ago, finally, there was a half day, I think it was a half day, one of the subcommittees at the legislature. I was able to do one of the opening session or the little speech, a testimony, I think we're calling them at that. And so I had to really think how to frame this so people wouldn't shut it down. And my slide here is that in the space of women more generally, there's this public space and private space. And women have always, throughout time, decades, have been in this private space and men more in the public space. Same thing for issues like childcare. That's a private issue, not a public issue. Families should take care of that. Women should take care of that. And just trying to change the frame. And I think we've done that. I think people more are saying, yeah, we got to do something. That's been a shift, and that hasn't been that long ago that we've shifted, not me personally, but all the work that everybody's doing has really shifted to that. just so you know, and if you want some more depth, these are some of the research. I have copies of that first one. We have done and just updated actually earlier this week, a white paper that goes through public policy solutions for Utah. What we do in that white paper is we have had researchers go to every single state in the nation and find out what are things people are doing, bring them all together in one place so that there's some resources. Also, I wanted to not forget and I don't know if my colleagues are aware of this, they probably are, but there is a Utah Women in the Economy, it used to be commission. It's with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, but they commissioned an expert, and I've actually met with her a couple of times and given names of lots of other people. And she's putting together and will release in December a really solid report on recommendations for Utah. So just making sure you all know that that's coming. We also have a few other resources. So just wanted to put them up there. Of course, entrepreneurship. That's something that connects with childcare since they're businesses, right? And so why is it important for us at the Utah Women in Leadership Project? As we strengthen the impact of women, we have to, part of that is in the workplace. That's an important, in a lot of families today, you don't have the choice. Even if there's two parents in the home, you don't have that choice. And so a few other items is, just Utah demographics are changing. And so this is important. Again, probably 3 years ago is when I really saw it after years of trying to get people's ear. And I know my colleagues have done the same thing, starting to actually listen. There's enough voices coming at decision makers. And that's not just legislators. I mean, that's one solution, but decision makers in business and all kinds of things. So working for pay is not a choice, as I mentioned, for most Utah women. In Utah, 52%, and this was just a couple of years ago, so it may have shifted a little bit, of Utah children under the age of 6 have all available parents in the workforce. All available parents. That's how it's worded. And some research I did when I was on the commission that I just talked about, that I was part of a conversation with, and the Gardner Institute actually did this research in various parts of the state on the 2 top concerns. Well, they did 5 top concerns, but for women workers in Utah, number 1 was childcare and flexibility. No surprise, right? Those are really important issues. And of course, the need for quality, affordable childcare is increasing, not decreasing. And I put this slide in to remind myself to let you know that in the last year, I've actually been to and run events, community gatherings in 29 counties in the state of Utah. And how many counties are there in Utah? 29. So, and in every community conversation, everyone, we put them in groups for part of it, and they talk about and flip chart, what are the biggest concerns and what we can do. Every single county, childcare came up. The need, the crisis situation for childcare came up. So I wanted to give you just a couple of quick quotes from some of our research. High quality, affordable childcare is a critically important issue, and efforts are being made in Utah by state agencies, community advocates, policymakers to address that. It's just started though, and there has to be more. So I'm very pleased that the league has taken this on. We need those voices, we need efforts, we need persuasion, what else? Everything, everything, because again, it still is sitting in that private space that families or whatever, and we know there's so much more to that conversation, right? And then Utah has both large families and a tight labor market, and childcare is an economic imperative. And actually those terms are what we use in Utah the most, because we're very economic focused. We must thoughtfully address our childcare needs in order to bolster the state economic or the economy today and in the future, as well as as well-educated children will comprise tomorrow's thriving labor force. And as we work to improve the childcare landscape, we will benefit families and strengthen the positive impact of women in their communities and in the state as a whole. But there are challenges. Just briefly, I'm keeping on top. I have 3 minutes left. We have been on the list. I've seen us on the list and not on another list, but we have been on the list of states that have a childcare desert. And most people don't get that. They just assume that there are plenty of stay-at-home moms that'll do childcare in their homes, and that's changing. So that childcare desert, that just means there's not enough childcare you got affordable quality, all of those things. But so just putting that out there, that we are still looked at and in some areas put on the list of the top. I'm trying to think, there was 18 states that they called in one report a couple of years ago. And then one thing that I have we had some COVID-19 research a couple of years ago that we published. And I will tell you that we had, if I'm remembering right, about 75, we had thousands of people respond, but about 75 were childcare owners or childcare workers. And almost everyone talked about not feeling respected. And I will tell you, and I get a little teary-eyed here, when we think about early learning, and you guys are you gals are much more expert than me. What happens in that early, and I have these grandkids, delightful little grandkids that I'm thinking of in those early ages, are just critical. Yet we don't often respect to the degree that we need to respect people, mostly women, right, that go into this field as a career. So they're low paid, all of those things. And I'll tell you that doesn't connect right there. Those are our most important resources. And of course, we know in our research, we talk about this, that childcare really is a market failure, not just in Utah. And that just means it's unaffordable to most families, but then childcare workers don't make very much. So there's this space in the middle that, unless there's interventions, we call them in my field, it's not going to happen. And maybe, it just has to. We have to have interventions. So we say it is really time for some change, right? And just putting this out there, one of the things that we're really doing for 7 years, and we're in year 2, is what's called a bolder way forward. And it's not only about childcare, but childcare is an important piece of it. So this is my last slide, just to put it up there, that it does intersect. We have 18 areas. We have a couple hundred leaders in this, spoke leaders, we call them, other kinds of leaders. But just if you can look at this slide, you'll see that childcare and pre-K programs, early childhood learning, and so forth is an important piece of the puzzle. And I would argue that it probably has some relation to every single thing else. There's got to be a connection between health, physical, mental, finances, of course, everything else. Pay gap even affects childcare, all of those things. And so what we're doing this for is to try to link all the issues so that we can more powerfully move together in a way that is going to change things. And we have to, I think my distinguished colleagues would agree, something has to be done. And something has to be done for the women, but also families, and that includes men and boys, but also so that our children can have those experiences that they need in a place that they're well cared for and educated as well. So thank you for your time, and I just wanted to set the stage today. So.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cerva.
Thank you for having me. I just want to acknowledge that I'm from Wisconsin. So I was like, we're all of these Midwest roots.
Yeah.
I was like, we're all deeply committed to Utah, but I think there's something about that Midwest connection. So I loved several of the things Dr. Madsen said were things that I was like making note of that I wanted to mention. One is the importance of that, the idea that this is a market failure, which means that the government has to step in, right? It's not solvable by the market. It's not working. And again, that's where, even if you're a small government state or a believer in small government, like that's one of the, known roles. That's where government steps in, right? Is when there is market failure. It doesn't solve for itself. So I have the opportunity right now at Utah Community Action of leading strategic partnerships. And as Linda said at the beginning, the two big ones that I'm working on right now are affordable housing development. And that one's really fun because that actually, there's not really a market failure. There's a shortage, but it's just because we're not building it fast enough. But you can see it's popping up all over, right? And it's a problem. It's the biggest need in the state right now, but it's actually profitable, right? So you're getting private developers stepping in. So there's actually a solution to that where it pencils out for people. That is not the case in childcare. So Utah Community Action, as Linda shared, we're one of the largest nonprofits in the state, the largest, community service provider in the state. And we have a bunch of different programs that are all aimed towards supporting individuals in poverty to become stable and self-reliant. And our largest program is Head Start. So you've probably heard of Head Start. Head Start is a high quality, no cost preschool to families who are below the federal poverty line. So the federal poverty line for a family of 4 is about $27,000 a year, which is like pretty unbelievable. What we spend for our program, again, we're a high quality, very deeply enriched program with about 20% of our kids have identified special needs. So we're an expensive program. We're directly federally funded. And we spend $25,000 to $28,000 per child. So that's the entire income. The average family we serve is actually about $24,000 a year. So these are working poor, and the cost of the care alone is more than they're making over the entire year. And these kids, you come into our classrooms, they're beautiful, and they're well kept, and they're lovely, and the kids are just so cute, and they're deeply engaged, and they love to have visitors and volunteers. If any of you want to come by, they love, they're just like any other little kids, but yet the trauma that most of these kids are in is like very intense, right? So for me, that's a little bit, the reason I got into this space about 10 years ago was because I was just volunteering at the road home. They had a little preschool there, and I just love those little kids. I love toddlers, and just saw, they'd be so sweet and loving, and then they'd turn around and they'd say, F you, or they would say, my dad's in jail for hitting my mom, or, they're in this, they were just in a very traumatizing environment. And I was just like, we have to do better for these kids. This is not okay. So I started reaching out to any people in government or in leaders of nonprofits that would talk to me. And just was like, what, and that's actually an interesting exercise to see who is actually available to like a random person. Nobody's ever heard of any Cervas or anything. So I just started meeting with people and ended up working for Salt Lake County Mayor Ben McAdams, doing homelessness and housing. And my passion was always, we can't have kids in shelters. We can't have kids in shelters. So, and that's, subcategory of childcare and of early childhood development, but that's very clearly, very transparently where I'm coming from, is how do we support those in the deepest need, in those most dire situations. And I come at it, I'm willing to make lots of different arguments. There's a very strong economic development, community economic development argument. There's small business entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurship. There's all kinds of really strong arguments to make, but my heart is just that these kids deserve better and need better, and their parents need that support as well, so that they can actually become self-reliant and stable, right? If you don't have your kid in a safe place, you're not going to be able to then go and get this job and get your education. It just really spirals downward for families very quickly, right? And so they're just in this immediate situation that's just very, very challenging. So that's what I come at it at this with. But what's interesting is I was recently meeting with a large funder, a local funder, and was making this community economic development argument, because I thought that's what I thought that's what would resonate the most, more conservative. And so, we're saying, workforce development, we need to get, like, we know that there's a shortage. I think the Chamber of Commerce just did a study in partnership with the United Way of Salt Lake and I think some other Voices for Utah Children about, and someone's gonna have to tell me. I'm not as good as you are about, I get excited. I'll talk all night. I'll talk all night.
15 minutes.
But their study found, obviously, of course, a huge shortage in childcare, but they were looking at it from that lens of like what we miss out in the economy, which is like it was like $1 billion because of people dropping out or unable to join the workforce, so that it's a loss to the economy. So they made that argument really strong. So I'm talking about that, and I'm talking about small businesses, and then I'm making a large ask for funds to expand childcare options. And he said, well, that's great, but I want to make sure, like, we're also looking at the development of the children, the early. And I was like, oh, you are speaking my language. Thank you so much. I said, yes, absolutely. We have high quality program. We look at social emotional needs, academic needs, healthcare. Do they have a dental home? Like, we do all of those things. And that's absolutely the model that we're going to keep doing as we work with the parents in developing them, their workforce skills and their ability to make a living wage and really become stable and self-reliant. So that was exciting. And I think there's more of that. And that's really what why I'm careful. Those who know me know that my tagline is always like, what I'm always going to say is, we're not talking about preschool, because then we're talking about school districts and spanning the state. We're not talking about childcare, because then it's like, well, then we're just talking about daycare and babysitting and minimum wage. And like, what we're just talking about is high quality early childhood services. And we're all on the same page. Like, I don't, if we serve a population that's more challenging, they do need additional resources their parents can't afford, but there's this huge spectrum of need where, and everybody doesn't need what we provide. Everybody doesn't need all day, full day childcare. That's great. Maybe a little bit more funding could allow a parent to stay home where otherwise they wouldn't. Maybe it would allow them, to have a part day, partial, people. Any of you have kids, that like when your kids are little, if you're working, you're piecing things together. So I've had times in my life where I have had the privilege of being at home with my two kids who are both in college now. And other times where I was working part-time, piecing things together, have one person watching a kid one day, have them like, there's all those things people are doing. And that we need more options so that parents have choices to determine what's best for their children. And again, that's me speaking a language that resonates in this state and in the legislature, right? So, because to me, I would say, let's go European style and make sure every child has free preschool. But like, that's not going to resonate. So what's going to work here? And it's just saying, let's make sure that parents have options to do what's best for their kids. Let's provide them the supports that they need to do that. As we do that, we can also ensure that we continue to have a growing and thriving workforce. And that parents who want to stay at home have that opportunity to do so, who are able to do so. And that those who really need to be working and really want to be working, have the supports available. We're talking, so nationally, childcare to be so housing to be affordable, it should be 30% or less of your income, right? So for childcare to be affordable, it should be 7% or less of your income. That's a very low number, because that's compared to what we see in the actual market. Because that means if you're making $100,000 a year, that you're spending $7,000 a year in childcare. That's just like that's not going to happen, right? Like, there's not childcare available at that range. So what we're trying to do, and where I love being in a position of, we've got some excellent researchers, advocates, people in obviously other providers as well, is because we operate a Head Start, which is, I don't care if you call it preschool, I don't care if you call it childcare, it's all of those things. But what we have the opportunity to do is leverage our existing expertise and our existing administrative structure to try to expand and do some of these things. Like, what's really big nationally is what's called a tri-share model. And I actually like to call it like more of a 4 quadra share model, because what they talk about is the an employer paying a piece as a benefit for employees. So just like you get maybe healthcare subsidy, or like there would be some sort of a childcare subsidy employers could provide. Then the employer, the parent provides some of the cost, and then, the state would, or government would provide a part. Now, our state isn't gonna, they've done different things there. At this point, they're not there to invest fully, right? We just barely funded kindergarten last year, right? Across the state. So, but there are some local municipalities, including the county, Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City, others that are interested in like, let's start exploring things. And so what we're trying to do is pop up a few classrooms. We're talking early. So for me, it's early Head Start, which is 0 to 3. There's more mixed age groups under state childcare licensing. But so we're looking at 0 to 3. So that would be 2 teachers for 8 kids. And is what you can correct me if that's different than the state regulations.
No, that'll be, I mean, it depends on the ages.
Okay,
but
yeah, theirs is more, ours
I
is
mean,
like,
you should be okay.
Yeah.
Even if you have 8 infants, 2 teachers should. be
yeah,
fine.
no, I know, I know the Head Start standards usually tend to be stricter than
They
the
tend
state
to be,
standards,
yeah,
but
so you should
it's
be okay.
close, it's all in there. But what we're trying to do is we're working right now with some private partners. So one would be an employer, so they're giving us space. And for a while, what they thought and what the city thought was, if we give you space, now it becomes financially feasible. And we're like, no, you are still not scratching the surface of how much this program costs. So we do have some donated space that we're building out. So we're seeking private funding to do that, philanthropic funding, which is another cool thing we can do as a nonprofit, is we can fundraise gaps. Because what we really want to do is show that it can be done, and show what the true cost is of like probably the most expensive model, which would be our model right now. And then say, okay, other people can do this too, and they can do it for cheaper. But we just want to say, we already have basically shared services for our own organization. So shared services is a common solution in the childcare space, where it's saying, let's bring together all these small businesses and let's share accounting expertise. Let's share all that like back end office stuff, like, IT, technology support, anything like that. Let's share that and like reduce that administrative cost burden. Whereas we already have that covered through our agency. So we have about 550 employees and about a $50 million a year annual budget. So we can cover all that and take that out of the equation for these 2 classrooms, work with a private organization to donate the space. And then we're seeking additional funding, which we have several large asks out, both public and private religious and private philanthropic. So religious philanthropic, but also just more traditional. And then let's just do this for 3 years, and we'll just incubate it. And then we can show how it can be done, where you can cut costs. We don't care to be the one doing this. We just want to make sure everybody has the opportunity if they need it, so that all kids are safe and learning and thriving, and teachers are paid a wage that's livable and respectable. So all we want to do is try to pop that up and then say, look, state, look, county, look, city, like this can be done. And this is what we need from you. Because right now they're hearing a lot of ideas with just outrageous cost numbers, and they're just like, no, or you're asking for too much. So we want to sort of parse that out and say, here's what we can pay, here's what employers or philanthropists can pay, and here's what we need from government, from the public sector to make this feasible. So that's real, and it's exciting because it can be done. Like the resources are there. We know there's resources available to make this to make this possible, and we know that the need is there and people can see it, and like people care, right? People do care. Like that's my approach. Isn't like, oh, they're so heartless working with the legislature. It's like, how do we speak to them in a way and show them solutions that resonate with their values? One of which is like, we take care of each other. So let's show them a way that we can do that in a way that's financially feasible and manageable. And then in the meantime, there's all these really not little, but very specific childcare licensing type legislation that we can work on and things like that to loosen things up. But let's just show them we can do this, and then say, look, this is it. This is it. Let's make this happen. So that's where I come at it, is that operator. How do we really make this possible so that those in the greatest needs have the support? And then again, we know into middle income, you still can't really afford quality childcare. And if you have any means and you're going to pay, a business is going to pay an accountant, they're going to pay them, top dollar. These are people making a lot of money. Your legal expertise, they're billing by 3-minute increments, making tons of money. And do we really care that much less about our kids? Like, no, not if they're my kid. and not if they're other people's kids either. So it's like, let's stop just ignoring and undervaluing work because it's traditionally female work that's been done for free. And let's really honor the professionalism of the people in the space and of the importance of those kiddos. I don't know how long I said. I get excited.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's a great way
To
Segue from
queue
Rep and
up,
Weier.
yeah, it's a great way to queue up what I'm going to talk about, which are things that I'm going to lay the landscape of policy. So Care for Kids is exactly what Dr. Cerva was talking about, and that we want every family to be able to care for their kids however that makes sense. That is the whole reason of being for Utah Care for Kids, is to bring together providers and parents and families and advocates to all push in the same direction to make some of these policy pieces that Janell talked about happen, because they're not going to happen without our voices and our input. And Janell, I think you and I are going to be working a lot closer is what it sounds like, based on what you just said. So we're on red alert because, as you heard, there is no county in Utah, let me say that again, no county in Utah that has an adequate supply of childcare. We have several counties in Utah that have 0 licensed childcare. And there are things we can do. There are policy choices we can make and should be making. Really, our legislature has not addressed childcare fully, really at all, to the last 3 years. And so, and it's been slow and incremental. So what I'd like to do is spend a minute and kind of lay out some of the policy things we know have worked, because the pandemic showed us what will work. And so I'm going to kind of start there. You might remember it was called the American Rescue Plan. Yeah, I might be the boring part of this. Hi, this is like going to school. So the American Rescue Plan was a way to infuse economic support into communities and states across the United States at a time when many things were shuttered. We learned firsthand, nobody works without childcare. When the childcares had to close, it caused a huge economic ripple through many communities in Utah and throughout the United States. So they knew they had to get childcare back on its feet. And childcare was crumbling. I've been in it since 1990. It's never been good. I have always worked for minimum wage with degrees. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? Because this is what we're up against. So the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, you might hear that, the ARPA funds, infused $24 billion into states at the height of COVID. Utah got about $600 million for childcare. This is just for childcare. This is in early care and learning programs. It was highly flexible money, which meant the state could do anything they wanted to with it. And it was great, actually, because they kind of did. And it allowed us to play and experiment with what does it take to make childcare sustainable. The first thing is $600 million. I mean, let's start with basics. So one of the things that a lot of money, about $250 million, went to the Department of Workforce Services Office of Child Care, where family child care providers and centers that were licensed in Utah could apply for stabilization grants based on their size and their need. And those were monthly infusions of cash directly into those programs. It was beautiful for these providers. They could pay $15 an hour or more. And actually, that was part of the requirement of some of the ARPA money, was you had to pay $15 an hour, which for many providers was an increase of anywhere from $3 to $6 an hour. Wow. So that's huge right there. This increased our childcare supply in Utah by 30%. We saw 30% more childcare slots in Utah. And even with that, we were still, for every, there are only 2 out of every 3 families in Utah, or I'm sorry, I should say that the other way. Only 1 out of every 3 families in Utah can find childcare, even with a 30% increase in childcare supply.
So we still have a huge problem. We went from a really horrible problem to just maybe a less horrible problem. And then, but that funding ended. And it ended just at the end of September here. So many childcare providers, and it decreased over the last year. So many childcare providers have only been getting about 25% of that full funding for the last year or so. And with that, we saw tuitions skyrocket. We have seen, anecdotally, we've seen particularly family childcare centers close. And some of that has been for other policy choices I'll talk about in a minute. So we know this is going to have an impact and we'll probably lose a lot of that childcare supply. Not all at once. You've heard the childcare cliff. It's probably really going to be a waterfall with childcare providers just kind of falling off the cliff slowly. Another thing that the American Rescue Plan did that was a huge part of the equation is families got a robust and fully refundable child tax credit. You might remember that. It was also just cash in parents' pockets, up to $3,600 a year per child, and with some decreases as they got older, which I think is odd because who has a cheap teenager? Anybody? Yeah, okay. But it did lift nationally 4 million kids out of poverty. That's what it did. And that now has, and when that ended, we saw 5 million go back into poverty when it ended. So the American Rescue Plan worked. It worked. And what we saw is that no, the economy boomed. This is part of the reason why we have one of the fastest recovering economies in the world, because we invested in infrastructure and in families and in children. And so all of this ARPA money has ended, and we knew it was coming. So in 2023, we started advocating for what we would need to keep this economic role happening, particularly for childcare providers. So we asked for a replacement of the stabilization funds at the 25% level, which is about 160 million. Remembering that Utah has 1.36 billion in untapped potential because of a lack of childcare. So for every dollar they could have invested there, they probably would have seen at least $5 return. We requested a refundable child tax credit, and I should have stopped myself. What refundable means is you get that money back no matter what your tax burden is. If you owe zero tax money, but there's a refundable tax credit of $1,000, you get that $1,000. Currently, our tax credit in Utah is non-refundable, which means only 1.8% of taxpayers in Utah receive it, because the income requirements are so narrow and the age, it only covers ages 1 through 4. Turns out kids need money at the age of 5 too. It's weird, I know. Can just stop feeding them, right? No? Okay. Janell's like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. So we also requested that childcare providers have access to childcare subsidies. So this is what we call the Kentucky model. There are about 13 states that implemented this during COVID with their COVID money that says a childcare provider, regardless of their income, so even if they don't qualify for childcare subsidy money, which is help from OCC, Office of Child Care, to payment of their childcare tuition, they can still get that subsidy money. So here's what that means on the ground. I'm a childcare provider. I employ 5 staff. One of my staff has a 2-year-old that she would like to bring as part of recruitment and retainment, because I pay $15 an hour. I say, hey, you can have free childcare. That's great, but you can only have 6 toddlers, 6 2-year-olds in a room with 1 teacher. And now we have 5. So now I've just lost that tuition. So what this allows providers to say is, oh, I can offer free or reduced childcare to my providers And I know I will get that tuition in the form of the subsidy, which helps A, keep good, talented staff, and B, helps the childcare provider stay in business. It's a unique business because we can't just make more widgets, right? I can't just sell more hamburgers and make more money for my childcare center. I can't just have kids, I can't like build rows and just, shelve them all day long, right? You're only allowed to have so many for really good reasons that I think we all love and, and respect. So that's why this is a market failure. Only the very rich can afford it. It's the definition of a market failure. So, and we asked for the private-public partnership that Janell already went through beautifully. So here's what we got. Are you ready? Oh, look excited. We got in 2022 HB 15. It increased the number of children allowed in unlicensed care from 4 to 6 because it was free. It was something free we could do. With that same bill, it increased the number of school-age children in a family child care center. You could have now 3, which meant you could go over ratio technically. It's a little more complicated than that, but what you need to know is it allowed more kids. You could have a total of 10 age 13 years of age and younger. How many of you would like 10 children by yourself in your home all day?
It's not safe.
It's not safe. I mean, it's not safe. It's simply not safe. Not to mention it might, invoke some insanity, right? My 3 were plenty, maybe too many. So HB 153, we got just this past year. And it was a non-refundable tax credit. Sorry, I missed adding the CTC part, but it's a non-refundable tax credit. It moved from going ages 1 to 3 to 1 to 4. So instead of helping 1.4% of taxpayers, we get the 1.8%. And then it increased again the number of children allowed in unlicensed care from 6 to 8. That's good news. No, because they're thinking if you don't have as much licensing, there'll be more supply. We've actually seen the opposite happen. Because if you have 12, 13, 14, 15 kids, but you don't have to be licensed anymore to have 8, you'll just not have your staff person only go to 8 and not have to do licensing. That means no oversight, no health and safety. They don't get information on safe sleep practices, on nutrition, on all the latest brain development. They don't get alerted when a registered sex offender moves into their neighborhood. This is really bad. It is very unsafe. We did get background checks added to that because I brought 12 providers to testify and they threw a fit. And they at least, okay, we'll give you background checks. Well, how do you enforce background checks on unlicensed providers? We have no idea how many unlicensed providers we have. The study that Dr. Madsen was talking about from Grace Reef that the Women in the Economy Subcommittee commissioned will help us get a handle on that. She's got some numbers for us, but we know as of August, we've only had 16 people come forward to be voluntarily background checked as unlicensed providers. I think we have more than 16 unlicensed providers, but I could be wrong. We did get parts of the Kentucky model passed in HB 461. So yes, childcare providers can receive those subsidies I talked about as long as it's covered by the federal Child Care Development Block Grant that every state gets. So only federal money. They put no state funding attached, which means the Office of Child Care does not have the money to implement it at this time. They don't have it. We're not even meeting the federal benchmark on how much we reimburse providers for market rate subsidies. We should be at 75%. We're between 50 and 60%, depending on the age range. So we're not even meeting the federal benchmark because they refuse to put any state funding into childcare. They will only do what is free. And then we have SB Senate Bill 176, which is the private-public partnership. It's a great thing. We're going to ask the state to give us some of their empty buildings sitting around doing nothing, taking up space, and ask for a little bit of money to retrofit. work with an employer, work with a childcare provider, such as what they're doing at a Utah Community Action. Did I get that right? Okay. Right. We said maybe $5 to $10 million out of a $30 billion budget. That shouldn't even rise, right? It failed. It failed to pass.
Thank you.
So,
for staying here.
Yeah.
In
So,
Utah.
right? I love Utah. I love you all. This is why I'm staying. I love you and I love this state, and we all deserve better. We all deserve better. Our kids deserve better. Our families deserve better. Our women who are talented and gifted and have so much to share for our world and our economy. And we're not just cogs in a wheel. We have to talk economy. We got to play to the players, as I say. But this is about human flourishing. This is about human flourishing. I didn't get into early childhood and into the clergy to sit around and watch people wilt, right? Which is why we're looking ahead, because we're always going forward. What's happened, happened. We acknowledge it. We're like, oh, okay, that's the reality. That's the lay of the land, y'all. Right? But we're going forward because Utah families and childcare providers have needs that actually they are the workforce behind the workforce, is what I like to say. This is not an option to fund this. Providers need public investment to remain open, and we need multiple delivery systems, as Janell was talking about. And we need both our federal and our state decision makers to step up. Some of our county and city decision makers are. Park City has put $1 million in their city budget for Park City families to apply for a grant. Summit County put $130,000 into their county budget for the same thing. We can do this. If our cities and counties can find $1 million, I think our state can find even more. We just have to make some choices and some of what we're going to prioritize. And that's where I need your voice. We'll talk about that in a minute. I need your voice. They don't care what I think. They care what you think. They work for you, by the way. Families need a fully refundable, accessible child tax credit, state and federal, because we do want multiple delivery systems. If the best thing for your family is a stay-at-home parent, you should get that, because there's all kinds of families and all kinds of circumstances and all kinds of child needs. Some children really need to be at home with a parent. That's how they're going to thrive. Some children really thrive in a large center or a home center, because children are people and we're all different. So they should get what they need. Childcare ratios need to be safe. Programs need to be licensed and providers need to be supported. It's not that we want Big Brother looking over shoulders, except we a little bit do with kids. But what we do want is because here's what providers fail to understand. It is someone that has been through licensing more times than is actually fun. It's good for me to be licensed. It's good for providers it's a safety mechanism for providers, because we do live in a society where things happen. Mistakes happen. We are human. But if you've been licensed and your provider or your center, your program has been inspected and said, yes, this is all safe, it protects you. Because now we also have insurance issues, as we've seen centers unable to access insurance at all because of liability issues. So licensing, so as they raise the number in unlicensed care, that might be great, but those people aren't going to be able to get homeowners insurance. There's no rider for that, which opens them up to a lot of litigation and a lot of loss, which we don't want that for anybody. Doesn't serve anybody. So one of the things we're looking at Care for Kids is we're hoping to get a coalition of folks together to have run a bill where we will move the number from 8 to 4 back to 4 in unlicensed care where it was. Let's level set. We can't just keep doing free things. Children deserve an investment. I'll end with a story I like to tell. I did a conference about 20 years ago with the Children's Defense Fund in Portland, Oregon. And I heard a story about the Maasai tribe in Eastern Africa. When they greet one another, they ask one another, how are the children? And if all is well, they respond, the response is the children are well. And because it's known that if the children are well, the community is well. So we have to ask ourselves as Utahns, how are the children? Because if they are not well, none of us are. So with that, thank you for that. Fire Hose Policy 101, hi. If you want to get involved with Care for Kids, check out our website. Contact me at careforkidsnetwork@gmail. Follow us on Utah Care for Kids on IG and Facebook and check us out. We do rallies. We did the Day Without Childcare. If you see a bunch of people with posters and t-shirts talking about childcare in front of the Capitol, it's probably us. But we're coalition building. So there's always room for more. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Holly. We have saved the best for last, y'all.
Thank you. And Holly Phillips is going to talk about after school care, because kids don't stop needing care just because they get to go to school.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm happy to be here because this is definitely a very passionate topic of mine. I would not be here doing the work that I am doing without the center that my 2-year-old goes to. But that takes a lot of finagling with my family budget every month to make that happen, first and foremost. And then I think Utah After School Network, we're grateful to be at this table. Thank you for recognizing that, yes, it doesn't, the Care for Kids doesn't stop when they go to kindergarten, middle school, high school. It's a continuum of care. So for us at Utah After School Network, you could maybe sum us up by saying we're all things school age. We do a lot of work around quality. So we are not a center. We do or a program. We don't have kids that come and hang out with us. Although there are days when I think all of us wish we could get back into program and work with kids, but we're really more, we are providers of quality technical assistance for the field. And really what that looks like, right, is two equally very important arenas. I have folks on my team that work in licensed childcare centers who work specifically with the school age classrooms. And then I also have a team of folks that work, we call it simply kind of our grant side, but you can easily think of it as like a Boys and Girls Club, a YMCA. School districts do after school programs, other community organizations. So they can take a lot of different forms. And it's specifically on the grant side, we work with teen programs as much as we work with elementary. So we're all things quality, like I said. So you can Google us and go to our website, but we just, that's kind of just our passion that we live out every day, because we know some things from research that we know is that we have seen that there can be improved academics regardless of the focus of the program. So even if the program does not have a direct focus on academics, the kids attending an after school program are going to make gains in their academics. We also know that, when there are standards around quality, that can help elevate the field. So that's a lot of what we do. We provide quality improvement resources, strategies around continuous quality improvement. We talk a lot with the field about dosage with the kids and what they're learning. And we work and help with staff behaviors and kid behaviors. We kind of span the spectrum on that regard. So that kind of sets us up. Quality, again, is in our wheelhouse. So diving in and kind of getting a little serious for a minute, I was asked to talk about the need, and the need is great. If you want to go to and look up the After School Alliance, they do a lot of nationwide studies that then they focus on the state level. So one in specific is the America After 3 p.m. report that they put out. So directly from that report, we know that here in Utah, for every one child in an after-school program, there are 8 kids waiting to get in. We also see from this report that 85% of Utah parents support public funding for after school, and it's bipartisan. So there's that goes across the lines in the support. We also see that 83% of parents agree that children deserve access to high quality after school and summer programs. So we know that the need is there. And the cost, well, to be frank, after school, we need 10 million just to meet the bare minimum, just to get us back to our like very low baseline that we had. Really, it would be twice that to really start to move the needle. We had some heavy hits this past year. Some that were mentioned, ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act funds sunsetting, had a huge effect on like after school as a whole. We also saw things, now I'm going to talk for a minute, it was mentioned, the Childcare Community Block Fund, or we fondly just call it CCDF. It's federal funding. I would say we had a 29% decrease. That was specifically around the school age portion. And it shouldn't be a competition. So this is another conversation that needs to keep happening, that money had to shift to help with the subsidies for the younger aged classrooms. So that's something that we want to continue to bring up, that they're all important. So what are we going to do to supplement to make sure that school age still has enough to operate, as well as all of the important younger age classrooms as well. We saw a small decrease in 21st Century Community Learning Centers as another federal grant that goes into after school programming. Then bringing it a little closer to home. And I don't want to get into too many specifics if you want to talk to me or Ben Trentleman, my executive director, but we did see this last year in the legislature a reallocation of state funds, specifically around our intergenerational poverty grant. Didn't go away, but it looks different than it did. It ended up being kind of going into a larger pot of money that went to the district or the LEA level. It really sort of did a disservice and after school was one of a few services that were lumped into that. So that did have an effect on after school as well. It resulted in an overall 41% decrease we saw this last year with our stuff. So as far as, I'll wrap up with just thinking about, legislative proposals. Like I said at the beginning, and I think we've all echoed this in our presentations, that it's that continuum of care, and a win in any of the arenas is a win for kids in Utah. So continuing to have that mindset around it. It was also mentioned, we see on average in after school that it's a $13 an hour wage. And that affects retention, and retention affects quality. So I think that that's a narrative that we can continue to have as we move forward. Our ultimate goal is for access for all kids to high quality programming. We can't ignore the fact that the wages are low for the staff. And especially another food for thought is that most staff are part-time. So also when we're like, you're part-time, you're gonna get $13 an hour, but don't forget quality. It's hard, right? They want you, but it's limited resources. So again, we need to switch our minds on that some as well. And then I just would say, continuing to support the Department of Workforce Services Office of Child Care, and then the Utah State Board of Education are two major players, at least on the federal level, in getting funding allocated in the state. So like I said, I'm really happy to be here and to get to join in and really echo everything that everybody said. So thanks.
Thank you. And could we thank all of our panelists, please? I have a couple questions, and the audience may have some questions, but I want to first turn to the panelists and say, does anyone here want to respond to anyone else?
One thing I just, as Holly was talking, I thought of this interesting, she's saying, what do we know from the research? And one thing I know this because I was telling a friend recently, because she was worried about her son staying out late. It was homecoming, he's a teenager. I was like, kids get pregnant after school. Like 3 to 5 is that's when teen pregnancies occur. They're unsupervised in the home. And that's that's one issue, right? But again, there's all these reasons why that's a time when kids get criminally involved. It's a difficult time because there's nowhere for kids to go. They just need a positive, safe space where they can go while their parents are working. So, like you're saying, it's just about that continuum. You need the whole range of services to support kids and working families.
And I want to echo what Holly said too around everything we're talking about is about quality of care, that our kids deserve the best high quality care at every age and stage, period.
So I just want,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Just around that, one more thing real quick. I mean, I was touched by, Holly and Bridgette both sharing about the wages. So I mean, I see this all the time with our teachers, and we do have the ability because we have, some robust federal funding to pay our teachers a little bit better, and to provide them with benefits. But what I see when I go into classroom, Head Start is the most heavily federally regulated social service program. So you see them and they're amazing. They're down on eye level, talking with kids, age appropriate. The food they're eating is part of the curriculum, like everything. It's just, these are experts. These are professionals. But because they're seen as just a daycare or caring for kids, they're not economically valued. And I'm like, this is a professional workforce. These are excellent early childhood professionals. This is who you would want, caring for your own child. And so again, just this idea that you don't get quality without, people, we can say as much as we want, oh, I do it for free, I just love it so much, but we all have to pay the bills, so I think, food costs and housing costs and, we need to treat people, if we need them teachers to show up with their best so they can give their best to the kids. And that means, providing some level of basic financial stability, which is just really difficult, if not impossible. It's assumed that anyone teaching or in the early childhood profession is a second income, an unnecessary, and it's not true. It's not true.
Just one quick thing, as we look at the research, I mean, it's not going to get any easier.
No.
It's just not. So we're talking about just functioning right now, and it's not going to get easier. So it's the priority we have, and our children need to be top priority. So I'm going to need to go.
Okay.
But I am really, speaking of children, my 29-year-old, I haven't seen him for 2 months. He told me he was going to be stopping by at 7:30, and I need to see my children, even though they don't need a daycare
That's okay.
or childcare or early, any of that. But I'm leaving you in the best hands. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Let me see if there are any questions from the audience. Yes. And do you want to come forward and speak in one of the mics? Oh, and if you can leave the handouts here, that would be great.
Since it seems that the legislature has finally woken up that we do have a homeless problem, could it help to frame the daycare solution as keeping a two-income family? In other words, keeping one income from dropping out, keeping people from getting homeless. Might that be a way to frame it more positively for the legislature?
So I've done so much work in our organization now. We do diversion for homelessness. So we're still very much involved in the homeless conversations. And one thing I will say right now is there's fatigue around the homeless issue. So it's been a major issue for a while now. There's a lot of fun there's a lot of movement in that space. And for us to kind of tie ourselves to that would be not helpful at this point,
okay.
because same thing from donor. I have new donors coming to me being like, I've been doing homeless, but I can't do it anymore. Like and our state is feeling the same, our legislators. So we are definitely talking about it for us as preventing homelessness and providing that groundwork for stability. But in terms of like a core argument, it's just sort of like there's fatigue around the issue.
No, because they just, said, gee, this homeless resource idea is not working, So I just thought that might work. And you know, that early childhood care has been known for centuries. Ignatius of Loyola said, give me a boy until he's 7 and I'll give you the man. So, you know, we've known about this for a while.
What I would love to see the state just, they could easily decide to end family homelessness.
Oh,
But we only have about 200 families.
yeah,
So like that would be amazing. And that would be like doable.
yeah.
Actually, that would be doable.
Of
But
course, and of
uh,
our big elephant in the room, the dominant religion, which has the resources.
And our state has the resources as a whole too, right? It's, we do have, one of the things we do need to watch is where we see tax cuts, right? One of the pieces we need to also, that I think could be an important part of all kinds of wraparound in social services, childcare, our unsheltered friends, food insecurity, all those things, is they keep cutting the income tax. Right? We have Amendment A that I know is no longer valid, right? It's void, which is lovely, but they're going to take another bite at that apple. They're going to try to, they have a goal of having the state income tax be at 0. It's their goal. So we need to kind of watch this from a few angles. To your point of what do we pay attention to? There is absolutely fatigue, around the unsheltered, in the work I've done with Family Promise and some other unsheltered Utah. So I think, you know, it's helpful for us in childcare and early care and learning to keep the main thing. And let's watch where the tax money goes.
Hi, so I just want to make sure it's done. So I don't have children, but I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I actually worked as an office manager at an early childhood program 20 years ago, and it wasn't even remotely affordable back then. So I just, I just really appreciate the work that y'all are doing. I work for a municipality here in Salt Lake County, and I've served on several employee advisory boards of sorts. And one of the frequent requests that come up from employees is that it'd be really great if we could have a work daycare, right? Or childcare. And, someone usually says, we'll look into it, we'll see. And then of course the answer is usually no, for reasons, no cost, no space, probably legal challenges, the works. Is there something I can do for my colleagues? I have many colleagues who are struggling with this issue with the work angle. Is there some other way I can go at it with my employer, and what might that look like? Or should I be focusing all my, resources on the legislature? Like, what can I be doing?
Yes. I think so many employers, think, oh, I can start an on-site childcare, and then they discover it economically, right, doesn't make sense. They're like, this is bad business, right? Because it's more than a business. One of the pieces that we have been looking at as a coalition is how to get employers to partner with already existing childcare centers, and to help them be sustainable. And by saying, hey, can we, let's say there's a home center next to a small business, there's 16 slots available. The employer says, hey, we would like 4 of those slots. We will pay you those 4 slots guaranteed and offer that as a benefit to our families. And maybe it's full tuition, maybe it's half tuition, but there's that kind of partnership with people that are already licensed, already functioning, and all they need to do is that partnership. So that's one angle from the work angle that we're kind of looking at, is how do we get the word out to employers to see who's already doing childcare or who might be willing to start one, in a building where they might get at least reduced space, reduced overhead. So, and I think the legislative piece can't be undersold, as far as it is so important that we all engage in the process. Vote for kids. vote for families, vote for childcare. And make sure, text 10 of your friends to do that as well. When the session, I know the session is a fire hose. I know, believe me, I know. Stay engaged. The best you can. Pick a couple of topics. Don't do it all. Don't do it all, but pick something and then, go testify, go listen to the floor discussion. Reach out to your legislative folks, talk to your mayors, your city council and say, hey, are you talking about childcare? Go to a city council meeting and in the comment, say, hey, I'm here just to lift up, we got to do more with childcare. Those are, when they start hearing it from enough people, that does move the needle. That's what we did in Park City. We flooded every single city county meeting for several months to where they were like, oh, here they are. Oh, well, here we are. So that's, my 2 cents.
And which I love. And again, you can't have all these things, they do have to happen simultaneously, right? I have like the policy stuff. That's my background. That's what and it became frustrating for me because I like to see things happening. And so now I'm in a place where like, I get to like make things happen, on a smaller scale. But again, that helps then the argument because then we can, so I'm like, okay, let's get something going. So, I mean, in terms of to me, I'm like 100% like show up, like we partner. I go to the Care for Kids Network, we go to the United Way, we all go to the same meetings and collectively advocate. We all partner very closely together. And then if there is someone that's interested, I mean, I would talk to anyone. I would say, here's what we would need. We could partner. We already do, or we do early childcare partnerships where we partner with Salt Lake County, with Ruth for Kids is another childcare provider, and then University Neighborhood Partners. So we already have like sort of that model. And then we would say, as a nonprofit, it's nice because we're not saying, here's what that costs and so you have to front it. What we'll say is we want to show how this can work and we will fundraise. So here's what we would need. Here's what we would ask for you for a commitment. We're looking at doing, we provide free. My interest, like I said, is like in the people who have the hardest time affording it. So then we're looking at a sliding scale of affordability above the 100% poverty level. So then we would be looking at, based on your, here would be the tuition that you would pay. Here's what, we would ask maybe you to contribute, or let's debate or negotiate what you could contribute. And then let's work to fundraise the rest. And let's just, again, show how we can do this. And stand some things up. And then we have a proof point to go to the state and say, look, this is working. The families want it. Employers are willing to do it. Right. So it's helpful to have those use cases of local, right? Because that's one thing with Utah legislature. They're like, well, that's another state. Utah's different. So they like Utah solutions. So like, we got to grow some. So that's, again, that's something I'm always happy to be part of in conversations like that. That's what I'm spending a lot of my time doing right now, is seeking public and private funding for partnerships just like that. So.
Thank you.
I think we have a couple questions online.
Yes, the first one probably is for the moderator. It's a bit of a housekeeping question. This viewer wants to know, how can they came in a little late, they noticed the session is being recorded, and how could they view this in its entirety afterwards? They also want to thank all the panelists for doing such a great job with wonderful advocacy. So
In a couple days, it will be posted on the League of Women Voters Salt Lake website under recordings.
okay, so go to the website, right?
In a couple days.
Great. The second question is, how do we persist with advocacy without letting the legislature get overly fatigued from these issues? This has kind of been addressed already a little bit, but I'll throw that out for the panel. And how do we balance that?
Something that we, I think, have found success with at Utah Afterschool Network is we have a couple really close allies in the legislature, and we stay connected with them. And so I think that they're a really good finger on the pulse. I think we've also We do a lot every year. You guys are welcome to come to the one this year. We do an after school day on the hill. So we do a lot to stay active and involved, but I think we've been intentional in not having maybe a direct ask every year. So we kind of do the like, hi, I'm here. Let's think about school age kids and how much they matter. But our kind of like big direct asks, we try to spread out a little bit. And I think over the last 3 to 5 years, I think we've come a long way in our partnerships so that we can get on board and collectively have some bigger pieces that we want to move forward, and we can just have that much of a bigger voice and really then can lean on those allies that we've made to then join our cause too. So that's kind of my initial thought.
That's great. Yeah.
I would just also say, don't underestimate the importance of local government. So again, that's a lot of my strategy right now, is to stay engaged in some of our networks that are advocating at the state. We do a lot of federal advocacy because most of our funding is direct federal. And we have the opportunity then to say, look, we're bringing this huge asset to the state. Like this would not exist. And then these kids would show up in kindergarten statistically 30 to 40% below their middle income white peers, right? Is kids of color, dual language learners, and kids in poverty. Like they're that. So we're getting them ready for school in a way that the kindergarten, so we're taking this huge burden off the public school system. So we do a lot of our advocacy around that. And then I like to find people that want to do the things, right? Like I said, who is just on board, and there's a lot of like, people are hearing about this. We've got now several of our city mayors, county government, administrative, they're like saying, what can we do? What do we do? And they're looking for solutions, and they're looking for like people like you that like care about this issue and that want to do something around it. And they're like, they all have it. Most of them have it right now as like a top priority, but they don't really know what to do. They're just like, we want to do something. So give us ideas. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this. So keep those conversations going at all levels.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing, I'm not afraid of being pesky because I think that pressure is sometimes what gets the needle to move. We've seen that in other movements, but we are very much working in counties. I'm working to build up leaders in each county to start to get people to go to county and city meetings throughout the counties because we know that when the counties start doing some things around childcare, that can put pressure on the legislature, right? We're really looking at this from grassroots up. I ask a lot of my providers in the network to invite their local and their local, state, and federal folks to their centers. Come see. And then you tell me what you think I need, right? Invite them. Start that dialogue. It's really hard to see somebody who's your neighbor as pesky. I mean, it's possible. My neighbors probably do, but right. But I think that's the key, is that we start having these conversations with our neighbors, and then city, county, state, federal. I don't do a lot of federal work. I don't have bandwidth, and I'm really focused on what's happening in Utah.
And just to connect this back to the after school network, I mean, if you want to see what a city can do that's outside of what they traditionally do, look to the city of South Salt Lake and Mayor Cherie Wood and her deep investment in partnerships there and in after school networks. Like it can be done. And it took a woman to be like, oh, we can do this. Why? No, but nobody's doing this. We're a city. We can tax. We're going to start doing it. And they're doing incredible work. So cities can absolutely step into this space.
Yes, Betty.
Saturday, the ladies basketball team had a brunch, and Lynn, the coach, stood up and said, "This is the year of the woman." And I wanted her to say, "And this is who we should vote for." But she said, then I went up and talked to her and I said, "You didn't say that." And what the other thing I was concerned about was, are your girls registered to vote? Because college kids move and they forget to change their address and they get in trouble. She said, not only are the girls registered, but the women, every athlete at the university is registered, and they get civics lessons as part of their break during their training, their practice sessions. So I'm also pesky. A number of times in my life, and Lynn can attest to this. We've had things like when we wanted Hidden Hollow to be a tunnel under the street. The kids at Hawthorne High School, they had one kid every week talk to the city council. So we need to tell all our women friends that this is the year of the women. There's lots of issues besides just childcare. But if we sort of spread it out and somebody makes an assignment and puts one person to speak at the city council on childcare, and then somebody else to talk about, I don't know what else, you can spread it out, and then you have to elect the right people. So you have to work on the legislators. I mean, we have some allies too, and that's so key to get them to write the bills. And it may take them a while, and they may have to do it 2 or 3 times, but we need to be pesky.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask the last 2 questions. One is, how about co-ops? Somebody suggested co-ops might be a solution or part of a solution. And then the other last question is, I think some lawmakers think that childcare is a choice for people who should be staying home and raising their own children. And I think that is a lack of economic understanding. So if you could address that. Take any order on either topic.
I can,
I don't want to hop. As far as co-ops, it can be part of the solution. I think everyone's looking for, the solution, capital THE. There's not one. There's several that will come together to make this beautiful web, tapestry maybe is a better word, of childcare that will cover every family and their needs. Some families really like co-ops, and there's some pluses and minuses to co-ops, just like family care and center care and anything else. So I think it can be part of the solution. I've seen co-ops that have functioned beautifully and have been really meaningful and have built a tight community. The part about co-op that I think is lovely is the communal piece. It can build neighbors into family where they care for each other, care for their kids together, and kind of merge their families. That can be beautiful. It can be hard. As far as the economic piece, that is a really good question. That is one that I know from my perspective of how I address that is some of the data that we have helps, but I'm trying to get women to tell their story. I think one of the pieces that we all struggle with in this arena is, I forget who said it, but we have the data. We have like 50 years of longitudinal data around the importance of early childhood. It started when I was born, right? And I'm not young. So we know, and the data does not change hearts and minds, stories do. We need to highlight the stories of real families, of real women, and say, hey, this is my reality. I'm not a statistic. I'm not a number. This is what's happening in my community, in my home. And this is how I need you to help me. Because I think sometimes because women have been in the private space, as Dr. Madsen pointed out, we forget sometimes women become a caricature. We're talked about and maybe to, but rarely with, and we're rarely heard in the same capacity. And that's not just a Utah thing. It's an American culture piece that we're still slowly, I'm seeing improvement, but we need those stories to be heard. And so I know that's not a sexy policy thing, but that's my opinion.
I think I would just echo that. And I mean, especially speaking, as a working mom with a young kid, that I think what we want, and it goes to the like storytelling piece, is a choice in the matter. I think stay-at-home dads are awesome. They're just as equally important as a stay-at-home mom. But I think for families where, and there's so many different reasons, I think that's easy to like stereotype and sum up too, but there's so many different reasons why both parents might choose to go back to work. So I think that we have to lift up and embrace too. So that's more the heart song side than like the economic side, but it does, we heard earlier that it does play a role having both family members go back into the workforce as well. But I just, from that heart piece, I think, we all deserve a choice. And we know that for a lot of families, that choice is made for them when they can't afford any of the care that is offered around them.
Quick about co-op. I mean, I'm on the exact same page with Bridgette, which is that we just need more solutions. And I don't necessarily think of co-op as in sort of the neighborhood co-op mutual aid societies type of way. That's obviously one thing that can happen but also small businesses coming together as co-ops, so that they're like, we're not a, Amazon, or we're not some large corporation that has the bandwidth to just provide this benefit to our employees, although they could, like they do with healthcare now, right? But large businesses, but like they could come together and bundle several small, like a co-op of small businesses that say, together we want to offer this benefit to our employees, and we'll help share the costs along with the provider, and some, subsidize for the individual based on their income. Right. So, and other systems have this, like you think about Intermountain and you're like, oh, they have doctors and surgeons, but they also have tons of cafeteria workers and EMTs and CNAs and custodians that are making like low wages. Right. So they can't afford childcare. Right. So we're starting to work with people, like that, and different groups that are where we're saying, your surgeons can afford high quality childcare, but all the other people that it takes to run your hospital can't. So what are some ways we can look to address that? Both through, we really look at layered approaches. So we're looking at, getting back to the finance piece, is Utah is the third least affordable housing state in the nation after Hawaii and California. That's when you look at how the affordability of housing combined with the wages. So we make the lowest wages, like there's the biggest gap in wages and housing affordability. So the reality is you can't afford to live here and then afford like what people are paying right now for rent. And then not even getting at the point of like, yes, okay, American dream, you want to buy a home, but people can never, there's no pathways to home ownership if you haven't inherited wealth. Or if you can't like enter the market with some sustainability. So, and then it becomes those issues just compound, right? When then you're saying, well, get an education, and like, well, I have a baby, and we have increasing, like a lot of the University of Utah's, lower completion rate compared to national flagship universities are because like women get married younger, get pregnant, and stop going to school. Right. And then we know 50% of people get divorced, and then these women are left in poverty. Right. So you can't really look at these issues without looking at the complexity of like human lives and all these things. It's not just, we're not just talking about childcare. We're talking about like the housing, and then how do you get education, and so that you can get out of a minimum wage job, so that you can actually have a home that's safe, and then help your kid, like where do we get out of that cycle? And again, there's lots of stories. I mean, I get to see this all the time. I just have been thinking about this today because I have the opportunity to work with a woman that policy council group I lead of parents. She's now the chair of, she's amazing. So she's also on our board of trustees. She's a recovering addict. She was sex trafficked. She had this horror, and now she is our chair. She's an incredible advocate. She has been, clean for a decade, has a full-time job giving back. So many of the people that we serve, that we employ, have accessed our services, and they're working for lower wages because they're so passionate about how this helped me and I want to give back. And you should be able to give back in ways that are meaningful if you love kids or want to help other refugees or other victims of domestic violence without having to be in poverty, right? And that happens through layering these supports, like, single moms, yeah, they can get ahead. They need a little more support. And we've got to get away from this individualistic thinking that like, you have to do it on your own, or you're not a good mom, or you're not a good parent, or you're lazy. It's like, we need to come together and look at these solutions as a society and as a group and as a community. And that's the only way that they can be solved. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. I have a couple announcements that I need to make to the League of Women Voters, and you guys don't need to stay and listen to them unless you want to. The most important announcement is for our unit meetings. They are all announced on our website under the calendar, but to highlight them here, the next unit meeting is the Wasatch Scholars at the University of Utah, Monday, the 21st at 6 p.m. In the Open Union, room 312. The Nightingales will meet Tuesday, October 22nd at Judy Short's home at 7:30 for a deeper discussion of topics related to this general meeting. The Night Owls will meet on the fourth Monday of the month, Monday, October 28th, 7:30 p.m. on Zoom and live at the Community of Grace Presbyterian Church. And I'm not sure of the topic of that meeting. And then finally, Town Club meets the first Thursday of the month, which will be November 7th at 11 a.m. in person in the Town Club. The topic will be the future of Abravanel Hall. The speaker will be former Dean Brenda Shear from the University of Utah Architecture and Planning School. And if you want to attend that, you need to be in touch with Kathy Bealey. And if you want to eat lunch, you need to pay Kathy $20 or $23. November 7th. Our next general meeting will be November 20th, when we will consider West Side equity. And we have 4 or 5 excellent speakers lined up for that. Finally, the League is still very actively involved in making sure people know about their right to vote, their right to register. You can register online until October 25th and in person right through Election Day, November 5th. If you're interested in being informed about who to vote for, go to vote411.org and you can learn about the people that are running for election in your areas, including judges. Thank you all for attending. If you have enjoyed this meeting, we hope you share this on your social media. Goodbye.